Hey, this is Jules, and today I'm going to go over my portfolio. I am someone who has worked independently online a lot over the past few years, so I wanted to give you the opportunity to take a look at my website, see how it's organized by landing pages, and also how I do an overview of my projects, and then get into my illustration and design services. So I'm going to go ahead and screen record and share that website with you now. Oh, yes. But before we start, I do want to say that there are many different ways to create a portfolio website. I'm someone who's worked as a graphic designer, illustrator, UX designer over the years. And in my podcast, I talk a little bit about how some people prefer having a single website for a single type of portfolio, one type of service, one type of website. However, as someone who has a lot of different skills and projects to showcase, I like showing up as my full self online, especially in my portfolio. So I put all my projects on one webpage, and I'll show you how to do that with Squarespace. You can make your website on any sort of portfolio site that is right for you. That's going to depend on budget, how much money you have to spend per month. If you're a student, if you're already a working professional, I find that Squarespace is a great platform to use that you can scale from an individual up to an agency. And there are also a lot of other sites out there that might offer discounts for students. If you have an Adobe membership, for example, you might be able to create an Adobe portfolio site with that membership. So look into what's right for you. Some things that I would consider when you're making your purchase decision is ease of editing that site. If you want to continue to edit that site yourself or work with another person. Some people don't work on all platforms. So if you're just starting out as a DIYer, consider that, maybe you're the person who's editing the site. Choose the easiest one to edit, and that's why I prefer Squarespace. I've tried different sites over the years like WordPress, Wix, Webflow. I always go back to Squarespace. I've used it since I started basically when I was blogging as a preteen, and I've stuck with it. It continues to improve and get better, and so that's why I choose to use Squarespace. And if you would like to explore your options, you absolutely can. I'm not telling you what you have to do. And I think that's what you'll hear a lot in the design industry these days, or specific corporate environments, what you absolutely have to do. I would say if you want to work with certain people and you're willing to make compromises to make your website or portfolio a certain way, listen to the people you want to work with. However, if you're more independent and you want to be a bit more creative, you have a lot more freedom to explore what your website can look like. Personally, this is just what I've gravitated to over the years. And I think these are not questions that you can figure out overnight. Sometimes it takes years of working on projects with other people to find what portfolio works for you. And I think it's a constant conversation. So don't think of any of these things that I'm going to show you, especially with my website, as hard or fast rules. This is what has worked for me, and I continue to evolve it as my personal desires as a creative grow and change. Let's dive into the website. This is my website. It is juliaaspero.me. You can see right up there. When you get to my website, there is a little blurb about who I am. Jules is a graphic designer and content writer based in Los Angeles. I have my contact information right here, a little bit of my background and experience. But I want to be very honest with you. When people go to landing pages, a lot of times the way they scroll is like this. So I think what's really important to have on a landing page, especially for a portfolio, is to have some information about who you are, then dive into the projects right away. I chose to put an image of myself right here. This is an older picture that I might want to update eventually. And then what I have is my podcast, The Pool Party. It's a design and branding podcast for DIY artists and entrepreneurs. I personally work with podcasters and musicians on visual art. This is the visual album art that I created on Canva. I just wanted to do something fun and out there. So I wanted to show people too that you can do it yourself and have fun with it. You don't have to have the best or most complicated software out there. And then we go into some of my design projects right here. And you can see all the projects I've done before. This is PAX, an ad I designed for a launch in Colorado. Some really good concept projects. For example, the Wendy's project. I also have some rescuing leftover cuisine, social media graphics, a lot of really fun concept art, and you can just flip through it like this. So this is a user experience and graphics case studies for exemplary projects I worked on, for example, the data dividend project. And if you were to click learn more and go into each of these pages, you would see more information on the user experience, shows you overview of the landing pages I've developed with others. And this is really important for user experience design because you want to take people through the flow and the process of how wireframes were designed, what kind of results he created. And then I also include graphics that I created for the launch of their social media page. I don't always write out exactly what each graphic is. For example, I could write in here that these images are for the Instagram. But what I find is that when I book a call with people, since people are not necessarily reading a ton of information on the website, a lot of times in first round or even second round interviews, I can go ahead and walk them through this page and describe what I did a lot more quickly than it would take for someone to read this information. So consider that as you're making your website, that a lot of times people don't have a lot of time to spend on each individual paragraph or summary. So you want to have some SEO, some summary just for the sake of getting through your website, but then keep it simple and short. So going back to the landing page, you could visit this website and take a look for yourself at juliaspiro.me. I like to have some motion on my website, but I've decided to keep my landing page pretty simple. I've changed a lot over the years, and I think one of the reasons why that works for me is because I am still learning what I like to do. And when I was doing some of these projects as a student, what I learned is that I really love illustrations. And so now as an independent artist and designer, what I do is a lot of graphics and illustrations. On my website, there's a lookbook, which I like to keep on here for clients that I'll work with. And I'm still figuring out how to divide up these categories. So even if you have suggestions of what categories you might like to purchase as a musician, a podcaster, or someone who works online, you can tell me. For example, we have the digital art pages. These are album art covers, and then some fun digital art that I've created in Photoshop. This is my Photoshop work. This is a series I created in 2020. Some people really like this style, and so that's why I keep it up on my website. And then I also have some illustration. And I know that these categories are divided just by how the illustration is made. For example, this type of illustration is hand-drawn on iPad. And if I were to zoom in, you can see that this is made with Apple Pencil. There's some Procreate sketches here, and this is a paid illustration series I did for Pacific Standard Magazine back in 2018. The landscape right here in Procreate, and this is all basically work that I would do on a stylus. And I choose to arrange my art like this because it's mostly an overview. I like the visual impact to stand out mostly to people so they can get the sense for how this would look in a gallery. And I consider this more art than I do design, so I don't really go into explaining it. I let the work speak for itself. And then of course we also have the podcast here, which links out to the RSS feed. And then here you can listen to the podcast essentially wherever you listen to podcasts. Yeah, and you can click here and also follow, rate it 5 stars. And then the last few things I'll show you too is this is a work in progress, but I currently turn all my podcasts into blogs. Each blog post has a transcript of what I discussed in the podcast. It also has the podcast linked here. And most of this is actually for SEO. So one of the reasons why I included this here is for search engine optimization. I'm just one person who works on my website. So in the future, I might want to spruce this up. But I also think when you're doing your website for yourself, think about what you want to achieve with each page that you've made on your website. And don't spend any more time if you don't feel that what you're trying to create is going to lead to a certain outcome. For example, for my webpage, for the purposes of what I do, I show my work, I give an overview of it. You could click into each project and learn more about it and see the process of how I got to a finished product. Sign up for the newsletter, listen to the podcast, and then essentially in the footer, we want everything else that's in the menu up top. But I keep it pretty simple. And for this reason, I like it because I could redo my website in basically a weekend. I can always choose to include the podcast, the blog services, or redo my services. But I'll quickly walk into what a good landing page for services is. It needs to explain really quickly what the product is. I create graphics for your brand, for example, and then you can learn more. This would take you right down to the service. And here I discuss that this package is 3 illustrations, 3 graphics, illustrations of character set and setting. And so what that would give you is basically just illustrations and key art that everyone needs that brings your brand to life. And everyone is a little bit different. So some people prefer to have more information on how the process will go, an initial meeting, a deposit, and then the design process. I also have information on pricing. And then next steps are simply to book a free call. So this is where we would discuss what the goals are. But if someone wants to fill out more information right away, who they are, and then their visions for the graphics or link to the body of work, for example, if you're a musician, you can send me your website or your SoundCloud, ideally websites. You could submit that and then I would read it. And it also has some information at the bottom too about who I am. But notice how I put this last because I'm keeping the focus on the customer here. Every single part of this webpage has either a learn more, but mostly a book a free consultation button. And this would take you directly to my calendar where you could book a session and that would immediately get you on my calendar so we could discuss more time together. And that's because then they have something to read and then something to do. And sometimes what I see with landing pages is that it's not obvious what the next steps are. The next steps need to be extremely obvious and right in your face from the get-go. This is what I believe is good enough to work independently online. This has gotten me lots of clients over the years, and it doesn't have to be complicated. It just needs to show proof of work, examples of what you can do, and the highest quality work, suggested that you have already seen now what your website can look like. And it doesn't have to be super complicated. My website is essentially 4 pages. There were times where I was a UX designer and had no illustrations, graphics, or any of that on my website. But ultimately I decided this is a part of my story of who I am as an artist. This is what I want to do. And I don't really want to live in a world where my art and my graphics don't matter. So that was a personal choice to put that on there. And people who are looking to hire me as a UX designer, if they don't want to see that, then we're probably not a good fit. I like to make strong decisions like that. And I think it's important to also make your own strong decisions based upon who you think might want to work with you, but most importantly, who you want to work with. That takes time. So I would say work on your portfolio, put some good projects up there, but then most importantly, get in front of people, figure out who wants to work with you just based upon what you put out there. There were times where I had no illustrations on my website. I just did UX, UI, and I did not like the type of people who reached out to work with me. Found out it was a lot of people who did not really value branding or art. They just wanted to basically use me and my production skill for UX, UI. And so that was something that I had to learn just through experience. And so that's why I try to show a lot more of myself online these days, because I want to work with people who are aligned with me. I work with designers, podcasters, artists. That's what I like to do. That's what inspires me. That's what helps me to continue working. And the reality is that there's so many people out there, especially when you're putting yourself online in the internet or you're out in the wild. Be real about who you want to work with, who is a good fit. And then even if you don't know yet, be aspirational, reach for the stars, land on the moon. Those are just my 2 cents. And these are the things that I wish people told me when I was first starting out. A lot of my mentors in design were much older, had been working for 15 plus years when I was showing them my portfolio. And someone who's been working as a designer for the last half decade, mostly since the pandemic. And so that will give you a lot of really good insight too as to why I chose to make my website the way it did, because I've only always ever worked online in remote settings. And I think that, in the past, people would also say too, like, you can have your portfolio on your iPad and I'll actually show you what I have a really cool portfolio on my iPad that I've never really had to show people or got to show them. I spent so much time on this too. And the thing is, if I ever were to have a meeting with someone in person, then I could show them my portfolio here. And while this is loading, I'll just say that, yeah, be very real with what works for you. Some people, they like to advertise themselves on TikTok. So maybe you show your work on TikTok, but I don't really just talking about projects on TikTok. I'm also really off TikTok these days. I studied with basically halfway through the pandemic. I started in 2019 and then I continued to study with them online in a remote setting during the year 2020. This is what we built during that time. We spent so little time actually working on Squarespace portfolios. I don't know if that's what they do these days, but during the time that I was with them, I made a portfolio that was more like this. and it has all my projects on here. It explains what they are. And I really love this portfolio still. You can even scroll on each website, some user experience in here. But this was like for a world where people worked more in person. That's why it's on the iPad. But now when I bring it with me, if I meet someone, I can show them my portfolio projects just like this. And it has a good mix of typography, typesetting, and then Photoshop. This is like the album art that I did. This is all on my website too, because obviously it's going to be higher quality there. But then again, yeah, it's just, this is 5 projects even on here, and it might be mock-up overkill. Oh yes, one of the best parts of this too though is that, let's see. Oh yeah, you can scroll. So that is like one of the benefits of having your portfolio on your iPad. And this is something I made in InDesign, and there are little tricks for this too, but I honestly think it took a lot of time to make this and I don't even really use it. So consider that. I think the ROI was low for making this, but I suppose I'm showing you now, so it has become part of my content. I was doing a lot of AR filters, but I don't do that anymore because I just don't like to. So yeah, you're gonna decide what you like over time, and then so you might have a lot of really cool work you can show, but just be mindful that even if it's cool, if you don't want to do it again in the future, maybe don't show it. You can show it maybe just to like flex on your skills if you want, but I've always felt like sometimes showing off cool work that I just don't want to do anymore because goals and desires change, but at least people know that I guess you've cut your teeth and you can do the work. So those are my thoughts, and if you would like any more help on your portfolio, you can contact me. You can even book a free consult and we can talk about your portfolio. If you want designs and illustrations, you can go to my website, juliaespero.me/services. All of that information will be down below in the description box, and we can talk more next time. And thank you so much. Go ahead and follow the Pool Party YouTube, find my podcast, and listen to it wherever you listen to podcasts, where I talk about more free branding and design education. All right, thank you and have a nice day. Bye.